right, good evening and welcome to the February 25th, 2020 Grafton Public Schools Committee meeting. I don't have a chairperson's update tonight. I will open for comments from the public. Okay, hearing none, we are going to go right into our fee discussion. So, thank you.
All right. All right, so with the committee's permission, I'll give a somewhat brief overview of fees. Most of the presentation is essentially the same as the one provided in October of 2019. I added a couple things. When we get to those pieces, I will speak to that. So first, here's that overview of the regional fees. And again, this goes back to the fall. When we took a look at 16 area districts, you could see, obviously, that 81% of those districts have athletic fees with a range of $50 a sport to $315. I think that was in Shrewsbury. And 3 districts charge more for hockey and football. About 31% charge activity fees, ranging from $25 to $100, and then bus fees from $100 to $300. That's half of the districts. We took out the regional districts. They're not allowed to charge bus fees. And then parking, that 31% of districts have parking fees, and those range from $20 to $210. The only district out of the 16 we looked at that have no fees is Millbury. They don't have fees for anything right now. When we consider the athletic fees, we made a bunch of assumptions. This is based on numbers from last year. So in total, we had 789 GHS athletes. We have only 900 students, so that isn't almost everybody participated. This includes students who did numerous sports. They might do 2, they might do 3, some do 1. We had last year 23 MIAA sports. We technically now have 25, and that we now belong to the wrestling co-op. We have 2 students who participate in that. That's sponsored or run through Northbridge. And we also have a unified track team. We've had the track team for years. It just became MIAA approved just this past year. They've added track, and maybe next year they'll be adding basketball. So we could go up to 26 MIAA teams officially. But that's what we looked at. We've roughly 12% free and reduced rate in town. So if we have fees, much like we do with transportation fees, there would be a reduction and or no cost to a certain percentage of our student body. We did not factor in with our projections any decrease in participation. We did not include any kind of cap. Like, for instance, we have a cap with the transportation fees. We didn't put one in yet for athletics. So those are the considerations, and we had a few different scenarios that we ran. The first was, don't change a thing. If we don't change a thing in terms of overall fees, we anticipate bringing in annually about $162,000. So that's, in essence, our baseline if nothing changes at all. Scenario 2 was adding a $200 per sport athletic fee. Again, right now with no cap. That would bring in an additional $139,000 above and beyond the monies brought in through transportation. So the gain being $139,000 if we did the $200 per sport fee. If we did half of that, we'd anticipate bringing in about $69,000 in additional monies. Okay. And then the fourth scenario that we had talked about was balanced fees. We are on the high side on transportation, being that $200. That's been certainly a burden to many families. The thought was, what if we added athletic fees at $150 a sport and at the same time decreased the transportation and parking fees from $200 per student down to $150? If we were to do that, we would bring in a total of $63,000 above and beyond what we bring in as of this year. So when you put them all together, in the green down on the lowest row, you can see how much, again, that we think we'd bring in based on our simple calculations. So no, there shouldn't be any surprises that might be refreshing your memory, but this is all stuff that has been discussed. The new piece came up, we had a request from one of the members, the committee members, to provide an idea of what we're looking at per sport cost. This isn't a super in-depth analysis. I provided a one-page sheet from our athletic director. It was in the handouts, it's in the drive folder, that provides a spreadsheet of all the different sports with number of coaches, transportation costs, equipment, officials, dues and fees. Again, it was designed to give you a flavor for the cost per sport. A huge factor in that is going to be the number of users or athletes. Our highest right now would be girls ice hockey, but that's because it's a relatively high cost, but we only have 2 students participating. Obviously, if we had 10 students, it would be broken up 10 ways as opposed to 2. This does not include the Grafton Middle School athletics. That's included in our overall athletic number. Major equipment purchases, if we do, and we do on a regular basis, have to buy either new sleds for football or goals for soccer, the field hockey goals, what have you. Those were I didn't include in there. Large-scale uniform purchases, those the boosters have been great. They've contributed every year $8,000 to $10,000 towards uniforms. That's been terrific, but there are times that we've had to buy new uniforms. A few years ago, we had to make a fairly significant investment in helmets when they changed some laws around football helmets. On a regular basis, we have to recondition helmets, for example. That I didn't include in here. The athletic director and trainer salaries aren't included, nor are custodial costs above and beyond. So if on a weekend we need custodial for practices or what have you, we did not include those costs. So taking those things out, the range was $978 per student for ice hockey, down to, that was the high, and the low being $139 per student for indoor track. 3 highest, boys hockey, girls basketball, and golf, and the 3 lowest, I don't think are a huge surprise to anybody. The track's on the lower end, indoor track, outdoor track, and cross country, all from $244 down. I also didn't include any sports that had a participation rate of less than 10. So I didn't want to cite the girls hockey with 2 participants as, a major factor in this. As we look at the fees, and it's discussed, obviously some considerations, and there are many, are the family and or student cap, if the committee was to move in this direction. Middle school sports, again, I haven't built that in. Middle school sports, I would argue, is just different than high school sports. It's great, it's robust. I think we have a great middle school program, but middle school soccer versus what we're doing at the high school level is kind of night and day. And then unified sports. Some districts do charge fees for the unified sports. The way that works is we have students with special needs who participate. That's fantastic, and we have an equal number, sometimes even a greater number, of students without special needs who participate. They go to the practices, they go to the games, they give it their all, and that's what really makes it awesome. It's one of the best programs that I've seen. They also don't practice and have the same level of scheduling that you would find on our more historically typical teams, where you're practicing 2.5 hours every day, you're traveling to away games night and on weekends. It's a very different schedule. So I would personally, if we went down the fee road, would recommend that we do not apply fees to unified sports at this time. And with that, I can take any questions you may have.
Is there any way of knowing what the impact of a cap will be on those numbers that you had up there?
Yeah, we can try. Off the top of my head, it's really hard because we don't know what that drop-off in participation is going to be. We could run it based on no change. We could definitely do that.
And
But
figure
I've
out how
talked to
many-
kids. I talked to a kid, it was probably 2 weeks ago. For a class with Mrs. Mealy, they're doing presentations around challenging topics. She chose athletic, sports fees. We met about it. She did an informal little poll among her friends and was surprised that a few of them who have been on the teams but who don't play, who generally sit on the bench and do it more for the social than actually playing, that experience, said, if we have fees, I'm not playing. Like, I almost didn't do it this year anyhow. You're going to throw in $100 or $200. So that's been on my mind. I mean, of course, we're going to have a decrease, I would think, in participation. I'm not sure how great that decrease is going to be. And again, I don't think it's the kid that's probably doing the club, whatever, who's getting playing time. But the kid on the end of the bench probably isn't thrilled to be there anyhow, but has enough motivation to be there. And we need those kids. Those kids are great. I'm glad they're doing it for many reasons. But if we see a move away from that, that's obviously going to just impact our numbers.
Jay, have you thought about the logistics? I know none of us actually were on the committee when the first committee that was referenced talked about, but I remember one of the concerns was logistics. We're already strapped. We already mentioned we're dropping down to one assistant principal at the high school next
Yep.
year. So have you thought about how this is going to be implemented and collected? And who's going to deal with the complaints of the parents who paid, but their kid isn't playing as much as they thought they might get to play?
Yeah. I've thought about both.
Me too.
In terms of the logistics, I think we'd have to focus our efforts on pushing as much as we possibly could to an online
Yeah.
payment system. Just a few years ago where that wasn't as possible, where there were more fees attached. If we didn't have that component, you've got like the athletic director, part-time, trying to chase kids down for fees. It is hard. I think people would be surprised how much effort and time we put into chasing down transportation fees, for example. I mean, it's kind of endless. So it worries me a little bit, but I think my answer would be we'd push as much as we can towards
Could we do it through
making it
Power
online.
School? Is there
Yeah, that's.
like a mod? There must
and we've
be,
been moving
because-
in that direction anyhow,
Yeah.
when we want to do that more with transportation. So I think that's going to be feasible. I'm not as worried as I would have been a few years
Okay.
back about that. In that same girl that I was talking to at the high school about this, interestingly, she said her parents were very pro-fee. And I said, why is that? Have they been hearing about our budget troubles, et cetera? And she said, no, they think if they pay a fee, they're going to be able to have more of a say in, with the coach in terms of playing time and strategy or whatever. I thought that was fascinating. I don't see that playing out in any way, shape, or form,
That'll be fun for the coaches.
but it's been on my mind.
Yeah. Okay.
I
That was a
would-
good answer. Thank you.
Sorry, I like what Heather said, like, I would like to see, if you can come up with, assuming there's no drop-off, what would that income be with all the caps?
And what would that, I guess I'd need,
What are the caps?
I'm not arguing.
Meaning, no,
What-
like, how many teams are there that already have like a family? I don't know if they can, do you have those
How many
numbers?
siblings are playing sports,
Yes.
basically?
I think
Or
Or
multiple
how many
sports.
kids are playing multiple
Multiple.
sports?
Yep.
I think
A little bit of a math
We can
problem.
definitely do that. I'd need to know just a little more, and it doesn't have to be tonight, but I need to know specifics in terms of, would that cap be $200?
Gotcha.
Or,
400.
whatever,
I think 400.
what,
Well, I think
or
we
whatever,
decide
for
what the
two
fee would
sports,
be,
whatever
and then
that
we
cost is,
figure out
that I
what the cap
could
would be.
easily,
Right.
I could figure that out.
Okay, all right.
But can I just ask you a question? When you mentioned the transportation fees, you said that is a burden for many families.
Yep.
I'm curious about how you know that. And is it something that was a burden in the early years of it being implemented that at this point is it getting any easier? Is it more of a thing? I remember being horrified to learn about it when my first kid hit 7th grade. And now my only problem is finding a checkbook and mailing it to you.
Right.
So I would just say, like, is it getting more
I find
accepted?
it's that I don't know if it's getting any better. Less of the shock happens. I mean, I still get those. Like, I never heard of this fee. Oh my gosh, and it's usually 7th grade. And sometimes when the kids go to park, that's like, oh my gosh, you're charging to park. It's illegal, and we go down that road for the
Right.
800th time. That comes up. We definitely struggle kind of quietly with that. Not that 12% who are free and reduced, who already are getting that lunch. They've done the paperwork. That's pretty easy.
Right.
It's that next 12%. I mean, I think everybody would be very surprised that we've got numerous families that have come to me and have set up payment plans for, might be $400. And they come through and we do what we do, but it always, as a resident of Grafton and somebody who has kids, it's a part of the job, but it's a tough conversation, and I imagine it's 10 times harder for them coming in to have that conversation.
Melissa.
Jay, do you think it would make it more palatable if we just gave that option of a payment plan for everybody? And then if you want to pay it off, you just pay, and if it's easier for people to pay on a monthly basis, then they do that.
I'd have to think about that. My gut tells me that, we are struggling to get a great vehicle to have online payment, never mind that next level of payment plans and trying to track that. Logistically, that could be really tough. From my heart, totally agrees that would be great. But when I set it up with parents, I would love to tell you, we've got this beautiful form, and it's not. It's what can you afford, and we make phone calls, and $18 here, $56 here. I think about my job's very broad, and I'm thrilled to have my job, but it's almost like a tax collector, or, a bill collector. And I just want everybody to be aware that we do have those families that, again, don't qualify. That 12%, that's 12 to 24% that really, really struggle almost. And they're the ones I worry about with lunches too.
Right.
They just are. It's kind of.
And is there any, does it have to be the percentage of free and reduced lunch that don't have to pay fees? Or would we be able to bump that up a little to include the next 10%?
Dan, do you have a brilliant answer?
Yeah, I mean, I think we could potentially have a separate, kind of threshold above that free reduced, for athletic fees. We do something like that for preschool. But yeah, there's, in the bus fee, in Massachusetts law, they mention bus fees, they mention the free reduced for bus fees, but other fees, I think, we're flexible on how we set our limits.
Yeah.
How would we know? So would a principal, so I'm thinking like back in, like, we always kind of knew at school, in elementary school, maybe who needed a free book or who needed help with a field trip or something. Is it the same type of thing? Would a principal, like, how would that work? Like a kid in high school?
It would have to be
who's
more
struggling,
formalized. We'd have to really communicate
and they'd have
that to parents, and it's on them to then.
to ask for help for their kid to
Right,
play a
or
sport.
submit the documentation that we do currently use. We've got that process fairly streamlined.
Yeah, we do have for preschool, we have a application for reduced, tuition, so we could have an application for reduced athletic fee. For preschool, I get income documentation and then make the determination, one by one.
Yeah, we'd have to just, think about how we communicate that and do it in a really, less of a, like now it's kind of a catch as catch can, where somebody has to be comfortable enough to reach out to me, come in, have a meeting. We're not publicizing that, but when they come in, we're obviously gonna work with anybody and
Right.
everybody. This would be a more formalized, like Dan said, more around, like what we do for preschool, I think would have to be the approach.
Although I think this is vastly different than preschool or riding a bus to school. Like, you have to go to school. You don't have
Yeah,
to
that's right,
Right.
play a sport.
yeah.
You know,
So I was gonna say, we
Yeah.
can continue asking questions, and then I would like to open it up to discussions, because I would like to hear people's thoughts. So do we have additional questions for Jay and Dan? And we can also be casual about it. Tyler?
Have you got the activity fees at other schools? Did we do any into that?
Not really. My recommendation would be to steer far away from, from activity fees. In my mind, and this is just simply my recommendation, is activity fees, for the most part, are connected to maybe once a week organizations. Like we talk about, we've been struggling just with athletic fees, never mind, and that's for pretty much a full season. You're practicing a few hours a day, you're traveling. The experience is different per team, but it's pretty close. Activity fees is, like, in my mind, the most fundamental public school extracurricular offering that we can provide. I want you to go and check out Best Buddies. I want you to go to Games Club. And you might try it for 2 weeks and say, this isn't for me. Go to student council, see if that kind of fits. The idea of being able to, and actually be encouraged to kind of bounce around and kind of feel out what works for you, I think that works beautifully with activities. I think sometimes people have the impression that art club meets every single day for 2 hours. It's not the case. It might be an hour with kids who have that similar interest on a Tuesday afternoon, and that's fantastic. I wish we could actually afford to have late buses to really support that for the kids who can't get their own ride home. But you can bounce around and try different clubs. I think that's fantastic and critical. You can't really do that with sports. Not that you can't change from soccer to cross country eventually, but you're not going to go to cross country for 2 days and then jump over to football, and then it just doesn't work like that. So I think it would be a real shame if we went that far. And all clubs are not created equal. Some run for 2 months, some go all year, it's all over the place in a good way. So I would strongly encourage the committee not to implement activity fees.
Good question. And we can start discussion, and obviously if we have questions.
Yeah,
Jay
we
and
can
Dan
just
aren't
sit
going
right here.
anywhere. But I'm very curious to hear everybody's thoughts. It does actually ultimately become a policy issue first, so we can make a decision, yay or nay, if we want to proceed with fees and how much tonight. And then the policy subcommittee would have to kind of work out the policy and come back, which is such a government thing, but that would be fine. We're trying to meet next week, so we could get on that pretty quickly, just to talk about procedures. So I would like to open it up and hear people's kind of thoughts.
well, yeah, I mean, I think we've discussed this in school committee before, but just to put it out there, that this is not because any of us think that there is anything beneficial necessarily for the overall good of students to charge. It's more, you're either going to, if we keep on running out of money, we're either gonna pay or not have it at all. Do you know what I mean? I just don't want it to look as though we think that there's an inherent good to making people pay.
Right.
It's that we're looking at the threat of not being able to afford to have sports.
Right.
And so this is it's sort of the lesser of two evils, rather than saying, oh, we think that people innately should be paying. If you do a very quick Google search, there are some data, just to answer your question from before, there are some data on what the attrition rate was, and it's anywhere from, there's a town that reported it in Florida, and they had an 8% attrition rate, and another town that reported a 50% attrition rate.
5-0?
50%.
Wow.
Yeah, so that's an N of 2, which is not terribly impressive in terms of statistics, but it's still something, and it indicates it's sort of all over the place. And my guess is it has to do with maybe how well people assimilated waivers for the fees. But I'm sure that if we did a more in-depth dig, we might find more information about what's happened when you institute fees.
I guess I came into tonight after thinking about this so much, really kind of thinking that, like Lisa mentioned, parents put so much money into their kids playing sports. And when you get to high school, it is a wonderful experience that you're not writing that check anymore. So how can we leave that money on the table was kind of what I was thinking about. Now, as anybody who knows me knows, I'm deeply into equity and access and opportunity for everyone. So I do struggle with that 10% above the free and reduced lunch and before where it's comfortable for a family. The majority, I think that many families in this town would not struggle with a $400 family cap for their kids to play sports every year. That is just a fact. I just don't think that they would blink an eye at it. Or they might blink an eye at it, but they won't be burdened by it.
It's a question of what else are you willing to give up?
Right.
Yeah.
For many families, I'm not sure they even have to make that decision.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
so do we, I guess, how do you make a decision for everyone?
Well, so, Jen?
So my feeling on all this is probably more to, I think what Chantal was saying earlier was, it's hard to ask for an override when there's still things that we can be doing.
Yes.
And that's kind of where I think we are. We don't want to have fees, we don't want to add more fees, but we're at a point where it's tough to ask the town unless we're willing to do more too. And that's kind of why I feel where we stand. How we implement it is a whole other story. But that's just my opinion of, if you want to get everyone's buy into it, we have to show our good faith that we are doing everything that we possibly can. Whether we think it's, well, I'm not wrong, but
There's a
it's
moral
hard.
dilemma, a little one.
Yeah.
Well, so Tyler, you had a question, and I have a
I have
response to Jen,
I
or a comment.
understand the good faith argument. I think what we don't see in athletics is this more behind it. I think there are a lot of kids who have $200, especially I know in sports like track, where you're not necessarily a starter. You say not a team because it is a team, but it's that sport where there are a lot of kids who do it for that social aspect. They're not looking to go play in college. They're not looking to play at that super competitive level. They just want something after school to do. But if you put $200 in, then they'll go find something else. But there's also a lot of kids who I think who athletics drives their academics. I know just in school I can count on multiple hands. There's dozens of kids who, if they didn't have athletics, they wouldn't be in school. Whether it's the football team, the hockey team, the soccer team, they get good grades so they can go play sports after. And if you add $200 into that and then they can't play if they're in that 12 to 25% that we say, they're just not, their academics will suffer as it. And I don't think it's always reflected through these numbers because obviously you can't see grades in this, but I think you might see grades suffer as a result of dropout and kids leaving sports. And I think that's something we should think about as, I think athletics does fuel some of the academics at the high school without a doubt.
So I have something I prepared, because I've also been thinking about this for months, and I think I'd like to read it now. You may know you haven't had a chance to talk yet, but I think Jay kind of touched on it when he said it was for activities extra. And I guess for me, it's a philosophy of what I believe we offer in a public school. Is it extra, or is this what we offer and what we think of a graduate? And so I'm just going to read this. And I know this isn't popular, but I am me, and I always feel like I need to be as authentic and honest as I can. So right now, I feel a tremendous amount of political pressure to implement athletic fees. And I know that there are a lot of people out there who want to see that the schools are doing everything we can to reduce costs and bring in additional revenue. I feel like with school choice, transportation fees, solar, the potential energy contract, and our conservative spending over the years, we already do that. And I know we are also under pressure because most of the surrounding school districts around us have also implemented fees, which makes me wonder, how come when it comes to something that could negatively impact students, we're fine with doing what everyone else does? But when we look at all the other programs that other schools are offering, we're fine to do without, like counselors, violin, later start times, additional science classes, one-to-one technology, and grades under 9th grade. Instead, we consistently have done without, and our kids fall further behind their peers in other zip codes. And I am well aware that we're laying off teachers. And even with fees, it's not going to be enough, and we're still going to need to lay off teachers. Even with fees, we're still going to need the override. And I'm curious, and if somebody who is insisting that they're going to vote against an override is suddenly going to change their mind because we've checked that box and now we've implemented fees. My hunch is that it's not going to be enough. They're going to ask why the fees aren't higher or why we aren't charging activity fees. And before we know it, what makes public school such a wonderful place and one that should benefit all students turns into one of fees, additional cuts, and inequality. And I've been really thinking about when Matt LeClaire came in last month and we asked him, or Jen actually asked him what his advice was to the students. And he said, get involved. He said, I joined the cross-country team. I joined the band. I learned how to play an instrument, percussion, and it helped me grow as a student. Now I'm doing the spring musical. I decided to do the musical and I'm really excited for it. It's these things outside of the courses that I've really grown, that have helped me really grow the most as a person. And that, to me, is what I want our students to look like when they graduate from Grafton High. I want them well-rounded, I want them involved, I want them educated. So those shouldn't be a surprise, but those are my fee thoughts. I respect everybody's, and I hear what people said, and it makes sense to me, but my job here is always to think what's best for students, and that, to me, it's not best for students, and I have to stand by that. I think we've made so many choices over the years that aren't best for students, and I'm standing my ground on this one. And it's a sword to fight on. My kids don't even play sports, so it's not a personal thing for me. So I had to share, because it's me.
I'd like to echo Matt's words, and if you go to the high school or the senior leaders nights, I think I've probably heard 7,000 times that the one advice I think every senior would give is to get involved. I know I'm in Best Buddies, DECA, tennis team, I played on a soccer team, game club, I'm trying to think what there's a
School
lot.
committee.
School committee. There are so many things at the high school, and I've had the most amazing teachers, and I've reflected back as I'm ending senior year. I've been so gifted to be at Grafton High School, or it's been a gift to be at Grafton High School, and I think I understand the 169,000, the 63,000. I understand that we're facing budget cuts and that this is kind of a way to make that up, but I really do think you will see great suffering if you try to implement fees, especially because whether it's Matt, I don't know if Matt's family might be able to afford that, but if he sees 200, he might not even go home and say something to his parents and just be like, okay, I'm not gonna do this, and then we don't have Matt sitting before us today. And I think the things outside of the traditional 7 a.m. to 2 p.m. school, what we learn in the classroom, our curriculum, they do amazing things, but I really feel like there's been a lot of clubs I've joined that I've learned more from those clubs than I have from school. Not to say at school I've learned so much in school, so I don't want to say, but you really do learn that much in clubs, and I worry that there will be kids who won't do that, won't have those opportunities. I know kids, my friends, that I know that I could, if these went with my family and I would be able to do them, but there are plenty of kids. There are plenty of kids in DECA. I know we're not talking activities fees, but there are plenty of kids, even on the tennis team, on the soccer team, on the basketball team, that won't have those opportunities if we do fees, and that's why I worry about implementing fees, losing kids, having less money from that number to begin with, but then also losing the academics and the community feel that go along with them. And that's my thoughts on that.
Well said.
Thank you.
Very good job. I've been feeling a lot of pressure from a lot of people. If we could make up the gap, it would be a no-brainer. I'm afraid for the kids. If we start charging fees and they can't afford it and they don't ask for help, we can't get kids to ask their teachers for help, let alone go to a coach and say, I want to play, I want to try a sport as a freshman. They're not going to do it. They're not going to have that experience. They're not going to get a chance. we have a lot of kids in this town that are very fortunate to have families that can afford for them to play in a club soccer or club softball, and their parents spend thousands of dollars. So my question is, how do we get those parents
Yeah.
to foot the bill so we can have an athletic program that everyone can enjoy? And I don't know the answer to that question.
It's called public school taxes. We all fit the bill. And to me, athletics are a part of what we offer our Grafton students. So people did it for us, and I know it's changing, and I know that this is the norm now. And that's just because it's normal to me doesn't make it okay. People pay taxes, and we offer this to our kids as part of their Grafton education. We have only a small amount of kids that take Latin. Should we be charging them to take Latin because only a small amount of kids do it? We have the AP science teacher is going to cost us more money than the level 1 English teacher. Do we charge more for the kids who want to take an AP science class just
Well,
because
we
it's
already do.
athletics? I know I'm a little crazy, and you can't do that. But you know what I mean? Like, just because it's athletics, we have to decide, is this something that we think is important for kids or not?
So, but the problem is that it's sort of sounding as though we either have everything or we have nothing. In reality, what you could do is say athletics are good. Let's do a classic cost-benefit analysis. Let's do a SWOT analysis. What sport offers the most to the most kids at the least cost? You don't have to have every sport. You cannot keep escalating. It becomes like an arms war of how many sports you're going to have, how many expensive sports are you going to have. And it's wonderful if you have the money, and I agree with you, Laura, that's why many of us think we pay our taxes, but the reality is that the taxes don't cover it. That's why we want an override, is because the taxes don't cover it. We wish they did, but they don't. And so, I mean, I would be strongly of the opinion of, yes, athletics are great. Exercise is fantastic. Competition is good for people. But we cannot have everything. Why don't we have a pool? Why don't we have a skating rink? Because we can't afford it, right? Or at least that's what we've been told. We can't afford it. So we have to live within our means to a certain extent. Doesn't mean you have to get rid of all sports, but it does mean you have to live to a certain extent within your means, I think. I also agree. I mean, I think perhaps what we could do is set up a trust for the sports. Why not? I mean, you know, you need to, for the good of your soul, you need to donate to things, and you also need to donate for your taxes. And so why don't we set up something where people can, as you say, people who can afford it can start to subsidize for the people who can't. I mean, that's what a town should do. That's what people should do.
So, I mean, sounds to me that we have, I mean, we can talk, someone can make a motion at any time. We can talk about what we're comfortable with, or if we need to come back with additional, like, it sounds to me like we have enough people that are in favor of doing something with fees. I can't tell that, but we can make a motion and people can vote. And we can talk about what we're comfortable with. I heard a lot of sound, Heather seemed like she was comfortable with the 200. We haven't really talked about the third option, which was lowering the transportation fee, which, you know, is high, and it is to get people to school. You know, I think if I had my druthers, I would probably get rid of that fee and do athletics, because I think it's a fundamental right to be able to get to school.
I actually can't believe the Commonwealth allows us to charge $200 to bus kids to school when they have to be in school.
Right, they have to be
Like, that to me,
here.
I can't even fathom why that's allowed.
Okay,
would
but
love
we
to-
also have had that in place
Right.
for so long. I
2012.
really think it would be a big step backwards to be like, let's get rid of that.
No, I don't think.
Yeah.
we
I'm not
can
saying
do
get rid of
that.
it, I just can't believe we're doing it.
Yeah, no, we're not doing that, but I'm saying we could lower it, and then that at least affects the grade, everybody who needs to either, unless their parents can drive them every day, or, you know, Heather, I'm throwing out ideas. I need some guidance from you guys.
Do
So
we-
what
do-
are you interested in doing?
Do we can we make a motion but not,
Yeah, we can.
that's not decided
We can
yet.
make a
That's-
motion to
I
implement
thought that was
fees.
part of the policy or not.
Sure. Well, Melissa and
No,
I
with
would
help,
need some
yeah.
input.
Absolutely.
Because you heard me, I'm gonna come up, you know, we need to do what everybody feels good. But yes, we could just make a motion to implement fees, and then in 2 weeks, we can come back and talk about what that means and how much it's going to be, and get different information. Is that,
Absolutely.
yeah, okay. If you guys want, we do need more discussion.
I would just say I would definitely be interested in figuring out what that number looks like with a cap, of $400 per family. Maybe run the numbers with 400 and 200, but 400, I think, was the cap that I saw when you ran a few different scenarios. And then I would also just be curious about how we can ease the burden for that other percentage of families.
Yeah, I would be very interested in that, in a dignified way.
Yes, in an easy and
Yes.
dignified way.
Dignified.
Like, if you tell me you can't pay, okay,
So-
that's what I would say.
So Dan, I don't know if you have the percentage of the amount of people who are in preschool, what percentage is in that sliding scale?
Like that gets the reduced tuition. I think, believe we have 5 families right now out of, 60.
But maybe can we use that percent to figure out, maybe that's, I don't know, I mean,
That's about
that's
12.
very small, but just to
About
give us something to
12%.
start from, yeah.
Actually match up pretty well.
Maybe,
Is
and
that
maybe
just unheard
maybe
of, like
that's
an
the answer to my
informal-
question, though. But when I said, can we, is there a way that we can have the families that can afford it help those
I
that can't?
agree.
I think that might be the way to do it, but I think you're right. It's got to be easy. It's got to be, not necessarily student-driven, because again, we have trouble having
Right.
kids advocate at that age to begin with.
You can do it the way a lot of camps do. When you pay your kids' camp, there's always a checkbox. Would you like to donate to another kid going to camp?
That's
Would you like to
fantastic.
donate a quarter, a half, 3/4, a whole, 2 kids?
And-
And all you do is check it off and you sign with your credit card and it goes. You have to make it easy like that. You have to make it easy to be good.
And we do that for, at least at North Street, I don't know if you guys, we did it for Nature's Classroom. And I can tell you that we're still we're still under every year because it's not enough for people to do that. But I love that idea. I think it's generous. I'm sure we're gonna see lots of GoFundMe's, just like we do for the student lunch.
But better
for
than
Johnny to play hockey.
GoFundMe would be something like to set up a charitable organization, because then people can take it off their taxes, and you can't do that with GoFundMe.
Right.
So you're gonna
Well,
get-
So we could do similar what we do for, I mean,
Helping Hands.
so I don't know if
Yeah.
did we talk about the boosters being, if they're a nonprofit or not? Are they, like PTOs, PTGs are nonprofits?
I don't know that they're registered.
Yeah.
And I
they
know
have to
there's a
be
We have
Like-
one
registered.
GHS
Lisa, can I ask you a
booster, but then we
question?
have
Do
the
you mind?
music too.
I'm sorry. I know you were involved in starting like a parent group at the high school. Is that a nonprofit?
The parent group really didn't go much further once my son graduated. I think it's, other parents need to pick that up
Yeah.
and resurrect that, because I really think that would generate, if you have parents that are football parents, they're stewards for that team.
Yeah.
If you have hockey parents, they're stewards for that team.
Yeah.
They certainly wouldn't want athletes not to play just because they couldn't afford it. And I think they could come together and make sure that everybody who needs to play, who wants to play, can play.
Great. I will.
Can I just say for a moment, though, parents are involved. They are fundraising. The football parents,
Yeah.
the lacrosse parents, they are still doing that. Those parents are very dedicated, and they put a lot of time and a lot of energy and a lot of money into raising money. So, it is being done, and maybe we formalize it. I think it's a great idea. It's just we definitely do have very active and passionate parents out
There's
there.
nothing on the website.
Lisa, if you're going to speak a lot, I think probably nobody can hear you from home. I'm sorry. And I know I called you out, so I appreciate you answering questions. Thank you.
We started the GHS Parent Connection. Heather Riley was on the school council with me. Okay, there's approximately 300 followers on a Facebook page. Okay, we have how many families at the high school? So that needs to be promoted by the administration to let people know that it exists. And there needs to be a mission, and it needs to be coordinated. And parents, teachers, administration, including the athletic director, I provided some information about how, an athletic director can interact with parents in a positive way. Be transparent.
yeah,
But I'm talking about,
I appreciate that, but I feel like we're kind of gearing off into a personal.
Well, it's not a
and-
personal thing. I'm talking about transparency in budgeting. So Jay, for the first time, we have a scenario of what each sport costs, okay? I mean, it was all balled up into one figure prior to tonight. And I just think that parents need to get involved, not talk to the coaches about, how much time their child plays on that team, but understand that it costs money to participate,
Right.
okay?
Yeah.
Athletics is a privilege, not a right in a public school, right?
I
So
disagree
in
with you.
2023,
Sure.
you would reduce it by 75% if the override didn't
We're
pass.
still
Is
going
that
to
correct?
need to
Okay.
reduce our athletics.
All right.
Fees or no fees. I have to make that clear. Like,
Yeah.
that this is going, even if, this is not going to change us cutting athletics in 2 years.
No, God,
You
no.
get to pay money. I still need you to do an override desperately, and you're gonna lose your sports in 2 years.
And in 3 years, you'll lose arts and music, so.
So, and Lisa, I appreciate it, but, so we're veering off topic because our role as school committee is not, we're not a parent group, and I just wanted to know if there was a nonprofit. That's not our role.
Right.
Our role tonight, or if we need to talk more about it, I mean, we have plenty of time, we can talk about it. I think somebody on Facebook told me we need to pony up. So I do think we've discussed this a lot. So, but if we wanna, I'm welcome to bring it again. We need to eventually make a decision whether we want athletics, and I like Jen's idea. If we don't, seems like we don't quite know. And the parents, like, that's not my job to rally the parents. I'm
So
sure they,
Is the motion, look, I just want to be clear, is the motion basically to refer this matter to policy subcommittee? Or is it,
I think I need direction, so Melissa, I need to know if you guys want fees or not. I can't come back with a policy stating that we need, right? I mean, so
right.
the motion is, are we going to implement fees or not? And then I need some pulse from the committee about how high you wanna go, and then we can come back with a
let's do it
policy.
one at a time. I move that we enact athletic fees beginning in the 2020-2021 academic year.
Okay,
Second it.
all right, motion made and seconded. Any further discussion? All those in favor? All those opposed? Okay, motion carries 4-1. Okay, and then I just feel like I need a little direction. And let me be clear, I voted against it. Obviously, I support the vote, and we will come back with a clear policy, and I will not try to sabotage our committee.
I think once we have maybe a better idea of those numbers of families from the athletic director and from you, we can start throwing in different numbers and see what it does for the budget.
I'd like to maybe I'm kind of speaking out of turn here, but the numbers for hockey in particular really, really concern me because they really are quite a bit higher. Simply because, again, the number of students and whatever, but kids who play hockey, my understanding from speaking to a number of hockey parents these last few weeks is that they have the ability to pay. They're used to paying. They have to pay for the ice time. It's very expensive. I would like the policy subcommittee to take a look at that, and maybe hockey is our outlier. Some districts charge more for football and for hockey, but our per pupil cost for football is actually right in the middle. It's not an outlier. It's not much higher. Basketball actually is quite a bit higher, which surprised me. But, we're talking about spending $1,000 per player for girls ice hockey and $977 per player for boys. That's quite a bit higher, and I would like to see that addressed somehow.
You're looking for kids to play now. Individual sports are gonna play higher, so we're gonna break it down by sports?
In this particular sport, I believe, yes.
We'll
that's
take a
what I'd
look
like
at
to
it.
see.
We should probably,
Random question, sorry. Why is girls' basketball higher? Like, what's making that cost so high?
I may or may not know. Let me find out.
No, it's a per
I
player.
met with
Oh, just per
Jim
player.
Scanlon
They have
today about
7
it.
fewer
but,
kids. than
It's
boys.
not.
Yeah,
No.
yeah.
Other transportation's less too.
Overall, boys is more, but it's just the per
Pupil.
pupil that breaks down differently.
Right.
Yeah.
and then you probably have to look at the cost of facilities also. So if you're looking at hockey, you have to prorate it for you're not maintaining the rink. Whereas if you look at anything that's using our fields, we're maintaining the fields.
Sure.
True.
So there's a very real cost that we don't face with hockey or swimming.
And it's certainly highlighted on the hockey side with the
Yep.
25,000, which is largely ice time.
Right.
That's true.
Oh, we have questions from the audience.
Madam Chair, if I may interrupt, I'm sorry. There's some members of the community back here that may have questions, and
Yep.
I'm just asking on behalf of them, can they address
Pete,
the
I
committee?
just saw people raise their hand. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thanks.
Old habits.
Is that fine?
Totally fine.
Please.
I think I have everything under control, but thank you. Robin?
Robin Callahan. I just have a question about the coaches. Like, the football coaches, this is 16,991. How many coaches is that?
Yeah, so that's a head coach and 4 assistant coaches. And the assistant coaches, basically as a unit, they coach not only the varsity team, but the JV team as well as the freshman team.
Okay, so what the coach gets is roughly the same, like, like golf is only one coach?
Yeah, they're
let's
all
say?
correct. Yep,
So,
yep.
I mean, I'm estimating,
That's
like,
right.
they're all between $2,000-$3,000
Yes.
per person?
I think the football, I can give you it is part of the contract. To
Yeah.
a fault, they haven't been adjusted probably for 15 years, like
Okay, I'm
literally.
fine. Yeah, I
But
just
I
wanted
think
to make sure.
football's a little more. I think that was around, I'm guessing right now, but say 4,500 as
Okay.
opposed to the 29.
And then what are the other workers?
That's largely like scorekeepers, if they have like linesmen
Okay.
for hockey, I don't know what they call them in football, but when they do the chains,
Right.
those people, anybody above and beyond.
Okay, and the dues and fees are,
They have to pay well, you'll see there's at least, I think the lowest number is 100. There's a scheduling fee that teams pay, and that's not to create their overall schedule, but to schedule the officials who come
okay,
in.
so like boys ice hockey is 25,000 for the dues and fees. Is that the fee for renting the ice?
Correct.
Okay,
Yep. And then the other ones, obviously, they don't have ice time. Those, for the most part, are, again, that officiating fee. Gymnastics, I got this crash course today in this. They have to pay for a choreographer,
okay.
work with them, and then they pay for music. There's all kinds of licensing issues with cheerleading music. I guess that's the business to go into.
All right, thank you.
24.
What's
going on?
Grafton.
Peter?
Peter Carlson, 42 Upton Road. I'm sad to hear most of you had to raise your hand tonight in favor of moving forward with the fees, but I truly understand the position that you all are in, and I think, as a member of this community, I want to come up front and apologize, and, if I feel that you were forced to have to do this tonight. I don't think that implementing fees is something that you should do because you're forced to do it, all right? But I understand that you made the decision tonight. But going forward, I would ask that you would consider in your policy and implementation of such fees, that you implement them over time and not just arbitrarily, next year, this is how much it's going to be. Give families time to gradually increase those fees, maybe in an implementation of something within 3 to 4 years to reach full height of the fee structure that you're anticipating to collect for these sports and athletics. I think it does a couple of things. One, it gives people time to properly fundraise and come up with plans to maybe help offset those costs. Two, it also helps those families saying, hey, we understand the situation that you may be in. You may not qualify for free and reduced lunch, which would absolve you from having to pay those fees, but maybe this would at least help alleviate and give them time to budget for these types of programs. Because the reason why I say that is that when students go from middle school to high school, there are additional fees that parents pay out of pocket to either further their child's academic progress with outside tutors or tutors with SATs or ACTs and so on and so forth to help them academically to not only be competitive with colleges, but to also prepare them from colleges. You don't have that when kids are in elementary school who are playing soccer or playing lacrosse or football. So I would say that if you're really going to be conscious about this and be sensitive to the increase in fees, take it from me. I've been on the select board for 7 months. I've heard more about trash bag fees than I care to ever want to admit. And by the way, you guys after tonight are going to hear about that. But I would say do your best to try to implement this over time and lessen the burden on families. Thank you.
Okay, so, do we have some idea, or would you like so I can also offer this, Melissa and I can come back with a recommendation on what we think the right fee would be, and you guys can implement it. I mean, we're obviously gonna have a first reading of the policy, a discussion, a second reading, so we can come up with language that we're gonna work with Jay and Dan and come up with a recommendation of what we think should happen, or does someone feel very strongly and wants to talk about that? So I'm happy to do that. I think we could come up with something.
I like the idea of lessening the transportation parking fees, because I do think they're high for going to school. So that's
So
that's
option
one
C.
direction I'm bringing you,
Yeah,
is to
okay.
lessen that part.
That's actually the one that I like the least, because I feel like we already have, that it's a bird in the hand. We probably need to hang on to it. And I would also say, I was interested in the $200 per sport with a $400 cap, because I think it actually will simplify a lot of the paperwork. I think people will cap out pretty quickly. If you have a couple of kids that play a fall sport, you're done. And I also think that the people that we are talking about who cannot pay $100 and $200 is, rather, the people who can afford it, the difference between 100 and 200 is negligible. And I think that's the majority of the families.
Do you
think
hang out
that's-
with different people than
I think that's
hang out
hard
with?
to assume that, yeah, like that's, only based on, when Tim had his say, like, a lot of people went up in arms, we said, we can afford.
Yeah.
And so I
have
don't wanna
another
assume that.
Thought. My other thought is, because we've already implemented fees, we know this is happening, we have a little bit of time, we could do a survey. We could survey people to find out what their stomach is for fees and make them aware of this. That'll help with awareness. So we could do something like that. It'll take a little bit of time, but not too much time. And we could see, because I think we're making guess estimates on who we know and what we hear. And I'm always a little uncomfortable about that, because my world is not as big as I'd love it to be. So we could do it that way and really hear from people themselves. Hey, 400 actually would be, 200 with a cap would be fine. 100 is palatable. And we don't have to do what they say. We could just take that into consideration. We talked about doing a survey anyway a few weeks ago to kind of let people know and talk about what the trade-offs are going to be. So this might be just a good kind of launching to do that.
I like that idea a lot. I want to hear from the people that
I
are
like
going to be
that a lot.
paying the fees, as opposed to people in the community who think we should be charging fees and maybe
Those
aren't
kids have
paying
graduated.
them. I'd also like to make sure we reach out to middle school parents, because they're coming up. So you got your 7th and 8th graders. I'd like to hear from them as well. Remember, they've just started paying that transportation fee.
Yeah,
so
no, that's gonna be a big change for me, $400 in the fall, in this end of the year, which is, I never like to bring myself into it, but. So I like the survey idea, if we
Survey.
can pull it together. Jay, I'm happy to work with you on it. And I
Sure.
think we had talked about an additional, doesn't have to be just fees, we can make it pretty quick. We can do this, I'd like to do it fairly quickly, because
I
Tony,
think-
we need to put this issue to bed and move on.
I like the idea of a survey very much. I would like that survey to investigate what the pain point is. So is the pain point you're not gonna go out to dinner this week? Or is the pain point you're not gonna buy your kids winter boots this year? So I'm not going out to dinner this week, then don't play, right?
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
gotta be willing to accept something like that. I'm not gonna buy my kid winter boots, that I care about. People have to be willing to.
Are you asking what would you give
What
up
would you
so your
give
kid
up?
could play
What
sports in
would
a
you give
survey?
up? Yeah, because I'd like to know because the reason why, Laura, is I don't want people to say, oh, no, that's way too much money for
I
me.
understand what you're saying.
Do you know? And then
Yeah.
you're saying, well, when you say it's too much money for me, what do you mean?
What do you mean? I work in a food pantry. I know what it's like for people who can't afford to eat. 100%.
Right.
I'm coming here.
Exactly.
I
Exactly.
understand. that.
That's the
There's a
pain point
difference
that I care
between
about.
when I need to cut back
Yeah,
in my family than when the people I see every day at my job who.
exactly.
And I guess that's what I
Yeah,
keep going
so
back to. I
understand what you're
really,
saying.
I know a lot of families and I know a lot of students, and I struggled to come up with actual people that this would be difficult for.
I can assure you there are a lot of them.
I understand that, I know, but
So are you? It sounds
demographics
like we
of
have
the
a
town would
majority
argue
of people
against
who
that.
at least would like to do a survey. I would feel a little. Okay, so we will work together to do a survey and just get some data to back it up, Heather. And we're definitely doing fees. We have some time. We know it's gonna be at least 100, and I think it sounds like we're not gonna be more than 200. Is that correct?
Yeah.
So people already know you're going to have fees. We might roll them out. We might, but it's gonna be between 100 and 200 per sport. We may have a family cap. So we're saying that we're gonna do a survey just to find out, is that 200 gonna be really hard for you? And I understand what you're saying, Melissa. We'll have to figure out how to word that.
I'm not quite sure how you do, but
I'm
I
not
really,
sure how you
but-
do either, if you can. So we'll think about
Yeah.
that. We'll think about it.
I just want people to think when they say I can't
You know,
afford
we
it
can
or
do
I
a drop
can.
down, like how much will this affect you, you know, severely? Like, I don't want to know if people can't afford winter boots versus going out like
No,
that.
that I was saying that as an example.
Yeah,
but
like me and my-
like, is it
yeah.
really going to affect
Yeah.
you, or does it mean you have a little bit less disposable cash
Yeah.
this?
Okay.
And
Or will my-
just to be clear about my interest in the $200 per sport, it is with a $400 family cap,
Cap.
without any doubt.
Yeah.
I don't think it should cost any family more than $400 a year for however many kids you have to play sports.
Okay. So if you have 3 kids and 2 of them play sports, you're
About
done.
if
Sounds
you
like the
have one
bus
kid
cap.
that does 3 sports.
Then they have a $400 cap.
$400 family cap across the board.
I have a question for Dan.
That's it, yep.
When do we put in the transportation fees? Like, when does that go out, when we start collecting?
We started collecting towards the end of the school year for next year, so
So
could
just
be
trying to
like
give us
May,
a guideline
yeah,
of when
like
we're gonna start before the summer.
May, June,
spring.
July.
I mean, the fall
We usually have
sports.
a deadline sometime in July for the fee.
Only because it's a lot of money that is being asked at once.
Yeah.
It's for the fall sports
Yeah.
and the transportation.
Well, that was gonna be a question I was gonna ask, though, if, you know,
Well, you don't pay until you get on the
I was just
sports
gonna say,
team,
you don't
right?
pay till you make the team, right?
Right, but it's still just,
I mean, you can't be collecting money from people that might not make a team and then
Right.
have to refund that money.
Yeah,
That's a
definitely gotta
huge.
but not
Trish.
everybody pays in May the transportation fee. I'm just saying.
Right, but I'm saying if we're all paying transportation fees in August and we have fall sports fees on top of it, you could be
Yep.
talking $800.
Yes, that's what we just voted for. So,
And
yeah,
that's,
that's what's gonna happen.
but I would assume that we would wait till kids make the team before we charge them the money.
Well, yeah.
Yeah, of course.
So late
So-
August.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so they try out. So you'll have to think, okay, my kid made, so you'll have to budget in June. You know, we know we have this transportation fee. I'll be with you in 1 second, Robin. We know we have the transportation fee in June, and now we know we possibly, if my kid makes the team, is going to have between 100 and 200 in the fall. So that's something now people know it's February still, so.
Yep.
Robin?
Just a quick question about the family cap. Would it be per season or would it be yearly? Because like my kids are far from the high school, but my kids play sports all year round. So would it be if I had 2 kids in a sport per season, am I going to be charged $400 per season, or would it be like a $400 max for the year?
I was assuming academic year.
I was
Yeah.
thinking
Okay.
for the year.
That's good. I started to like. All right, perfect. Thanks.
Thank you. Good question, because we're gonna have to think about all these things when we write up the policy. But I'll steal from all the other districts that do it, so fortunately we have that.
And then-
Okay.
All right, I'm gonna let it go.
So yeah, obviously I'll run those numbers with the
But I will.
cap, but if we did it that way, if it's a $400, forget family cap, if it's an individual cap, is that, no?
No,
Okay.
$400 family
Talking
cap per
family
year.
cap.
Okay.
No family has to pay more than $400 a year for however many children you have to play sports at Grafton High.
So then do we not need to do a survey? Are you guys comfortable with that? Seems like Heather is pretty comfortable with that.
I like to.
I'd like to feel people out.
Okay, we're still gonna do a
And
survey.
I'm fine with the survey. I'm not
Oh,
opposing it by any
no,
means.
but you seem like you're
Survey
pretty,
away.
like you have it in your head. So we're gonna still, we haven't decided yet, I think is the
number
answer.
was
Okay.
Much lower.
I just wanna be clear on what we're doing, and I don't,
And if she's in the cap,
thank you.
400 per family?
All right, any other thoughts about fees? We'll get lots of opportunity to talk again when
they
we
pay
bring
less
back our
than
survey results and our policy, so.
We'll hear from a lot of people, don't worry.
I'm excited. I loved hearing from people tonight. It was great. Okay, so now,
Perfect,
When you're done, can I steal your?
yeah.
okay, we're going to move on to the voting on our fiscal '21 budget.
Okay.
Are you guys ready? You need a recess.
Oh, no, we're good. I guess Dan's not.
Dan's not
Ready?
All right.
I can obviously take the committee's direction in terms of, if you want me to go through this for the 800th time, I'm happy to. You want me to?
Did we just do this for the hearing? This is the
We
same one?
did.
Is it the same one for the hearing?
Oh.
Yeah.
Then I
I mean,
don't,
I don't
I have
see
plenty
it.
of backup documents, but there's nothing other than,
yeah,
I mean, obviously, we've been talking about this since, what, August?
yeah.
You made it crystal clear that time.
And we're voting only on the bottom line number.
Correct. So before you, I can obviously, and when Dan comes back, answer any question you might have, but other than those modifications that we made, nothing's changed from what's been presented often. I put before you a voting document just to make it really clear, but what the committee's voting on is that bottom line number of $38,092,653. Oftentimes people, not committee members, but people think once you vote, every line out of our hundreds of lines are just locked in. It's not the case. We could have a kid move in tomorrow. The town could come up with more money or less money, and we're gonna have to make changes. So again, it's just that bottom line number. Once we have that, I let Tim McInerney know. I'm jumping a little bit ahead. Well, let's finish this part, and then I'll jump ahead to the kind of longer-term planning. So any questions about the FY '21 budget?
I don't have a question, I just have a comment. So I think when people see this number, we're doing this with a revised number, it's not the number that we really need or really want for our
Correct.
budget.
Yep.
I'm still advocating for an override, but we need to submit some sort of
That's right.
agreed budget for Tim. So
Yeah, well put.
just because we have this budget does not mean that this is a budget that we at least have been advocating for. And I appreciate you guys redoing the budget. Thank you.
Oh, our
And
pleasure.
are we,
And,
are we going to get, it's gonna be the new one's gonna be made available online?
yeah, it already
It
is.
already is.
Yep.
Can I get
Yeah.
a binder?
I'm sorry?
Can I get a binder?
Yeah. Anybody that wants one, absolutely.
I'll break my old one in.
Okay, perfect.
I'll bring my old one in too.
Recycle the
Yeah.
And
contents.
most of it remains unchanged. I think grant
Yeah.
funding, that hasn't changed. There are big chunks that
Yeah,
haven't.
so,
Obviously, the strategic plan, that stuff we don't mess with.
Yeah.
So it's really, a dozen lines have changed, and those are reflected in what we've already talked about tonight.
The bottom line of the voting document, I mean, when we make the actual motion, we'll say the right year, but the bottom line does say FY '20.
Oh, yeah, my mistake, sorry.
But no, I
But
just,
yeah, it's
I
definitely
just now
for, it's
noticed it. but
definitely for 21.
Definitely for 21.
Yeah, so if that's included in the motion, we're good to go. This is just, it turned out to be not that helpful, but it's just a helpful document. This isn't some kind of legal document.
Okay, are we ready to make a motion?
Ready?
Okay. Pauline.
You want to do it, or you want me to do it?
Do it.
I move the school committee approve the FY 2021 operating budget in the amount of $38,092,653.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Any further discussion? All those in favor? All right, motion carries. Thank you both for all your work on the budget. I know we will be revisiting
Going through
it a
stuff.
lot.
This is part of the budget.
So good.
So just in terms of so that temporarily nails down FY '21. In terms of that long-term planning, just to update you, tomorrow Dan and I are meeting with the town administrator, like we did prior to the override in the spring of 14. We're going to look at different options regarding projections. I mentioned earlier the great work that's being done by Bob Wall and Nicole McDonald around staffing, so that's something in particular we're going to be focused in on. We're going to create a recommendation, or potentially a few different recommendations with the town administrator, and then meet again for a joint meeting with Tri-Board on March 5th. So those are the next steps, and that is already in motion, but that meeting will be important tomorrow.
Thank you. Thank you. Well done. School committee member reports. Jean?
Right now, districts for winter sports are starting. The girls played last night, hockey plays Wednesday, and boys basketball plays Thursday. Student council is going to Hyannis next week for our winter conference. It was a lot of fun. We'll be down there for 2 nights. And right now for the class competitions, we're thinking about doing that next month or in a month and a half for a new thing that we're implementing for another Spirit Week, and then more class competitions on the Friday that we do in homecoming. So we're looking forward to that.
Great.
What was the last thing you said about homecoming?
More than.
So we
more than
do
homecoming.
another Spirit Week coming in the spring rather than just doing one in the fall
Gotcha.
for homecoming.
Okay. Fun. Anybody?
Grafton Sustainability Commission is meeting on Thursday. It will be taped. We're gonna take a first look, I believe, at the benchmarking document that will be made public. We've been doing a lot of research. Dan has been so helpful. When the town websites all over the Commonwealth were down this morning, I called Dan. I was like, can you help me get this data? So we're still gathering lots and lots of data, and we're trying to put together a report that kind of gives us a sense of where we are in comparison to our neighbors and like towns.
Ask
Yeah.
you a question.
Sure.
So, and I know it's a sustainability committee, so this might be kind of a dumb question, but when you're looking at are you looking at just spending or are you looking at programming?
Right now, we're looking at spending primarily. We're looking at staffing. So we're not necessarily looking at what types of programs the schools are offering. We're just looking, what percentage is special education staff? What percentage is teachers? What are the superintendent salaries like? That kind of stuff. Those are the metrics we're using
Yeah.
right now.
Which is, yeah. Okay. Thanks.
Let's do an update, Tyler.
Yeah, James just gave a really good one, but I don't know.
Not that it's a competition.
Yeah, it was really good. Well done. Maybe you talked about student council and sports.
DECA's going to Boston, Thursday.
Nice.
So they'll be bringing 29 students to states this year, so.
Congrats.
Good job.
That's
And then
great.
we just secured, I believe, 4 leadership spots for Nashville, the international conference. So
Congrats.
if we have no one qualifies, which we hopefully will,
Yeah.
we'll be sending 3 or 4 students plus Mr. Maxwell to Nashville
Nice.
April 27th to May 2nd, with 25,000 other DECA students from 13 different countries, I believe.
Wow.
So that will be however many days that is. So we just got those spots a couple days ago, so.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Congrats. Great.
Good luck.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Good program. And I feel like last year when you guys went, we had people come and present.
Yeah.
We should
Yeah, we can do that again.
love to do
definitely.
that again. That was good. And we did, so superintendent's report.
Yeah, I don't have much. It's really more future agenda, but I reached out to the cheerleaders about coming. They can come on April 14th. They're still talking about doing like stunts and stuff, so I've got to, I think I have to,
lighting.
I know, I've got to kind of show them the
it's gonna be
spot.
possible.
No.
Okay, maybe you can,
I already
I
told
tried
them
to
that.
communicate it,
Yeah.
but they're going to come April 14th.
Let's do it in the high school.
Yeah,
We
we'll
could.
move.
No.
And at the next meeting, we're hoping to have some representatives from the Unified Sports
Yes.
Program come. They recently were awarded a banner, one of 2 districts in the state for their great program. And we have 2 shows coming out. The one done on South Grafton and North Grafton Elementary. They've filmed already and they're putting that together. And then senior Sydney Grass and I filmed a show where we we're starting to spotlight on Grafton, I think is the name of it, and focusing on the students and staff that make up the district. And we had Madigan Linane come in and perform, and we interviewed Mary Coakley, who you guys met at the last meeting. It was the assistant principal of the year, so that should come out any day now.
Cool. Perfect. So we'll share that out on our social media.
And obviously, you guys all know this, but we filmed down at the Cable Access Studio, and Bob Toma and Jack filmed, and they were awesome. It was great. So many thanks to them.
I love that you're doing that. And Jay and I also kind of talked about sitting down and doing like a kind of a budget Q&A too, so we can ask all the questions. I'd actually like to figure out, and I know I have people that can do it, but to splice the questions tonight and to kind of send those out as like little Q&As, like that school choice question. We get that so many times. I'd love to, and I know Peter can do it and a bunch of people, so
And
splice
I
it
can
out.
certainly add more detail.
Yeah, that was a
the
good
numbers
answer, and I
are
was like, I wish I was
fantastic.
filming it, but I was like, oh, we are filming it. So we get that question a lot.
Yeah, there's a lot of misunderstanding about it.
Yeah, it's hard, it was a good question. So for future agenda planning, I sent out an email about Tracy Novak coming. I'm just waiting on you, Melissa, but you've been through it before, and I know it might not.
I've
even-
missed all kinds of emails.
It
I'm
was just
so
today,
sorry.
but it
Oh,
looks like
okay.
we're gonna
No,
try to do the
that
March.
I haven't even begun to look at.
The March,
Yep.
or yesterday, the March date. So I'll let you know on that. I'm gonna double check with Tracy, but I would like to open that up to other boards and committees, so we could have a really nice workshop with them. And, yes, Jay mentioned the March 5th. Jen's been away. I offered to host and make the agenda. I'm just kind of waiting to confirm from her. And we're gonna set the agenda. My initial thoughts were we need to talk about if we're having an override, they need to vote on that and when, the amount and when we're going to have it. Is I think what the big discussion items would be.
What
But
time is it on May 5th?
it's March 5th,
Oh, March 5th, I meant.
7 o'clock, I believe. But I'll let you know. We haven't set, we have to find a room and we have not done that. But it's on my list for future agenda planning. And now that we got through the budget, it's the best part of school committee. So we get to hear our school updates and, yeah, the spring's always the best part, I think.
Can I plug early voting down at the cable station?
Sure.
Early
Yes.
voting. Go down to the cable station and vote early. Don't wait. It's through the end of the week, I believe.
Go early?
Vote often.
Thank you.
You're not running, though.
No,
That joke is never going to get old.
I love it though.
Not
It's
ever.
funny to me every time. Okay, moving on to the warrant.
I move the school committee approve the warrant number 34 dated February 20th, 2020 in the amount of $560,494.08.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Motion carries. Right, we don't have policy, but we still are gonna meet even though we're waiting on the survey, because we have to talk about that implementing fees, for the, raising the fees for the cost to rent. That's a policy issue too. We talked about that a few meetings ago. And we have some other policies to look at too. There's a new one coming out about public comment that we've kind of been waiting for from MASC, after some lawsuits, so I'm kind of anxious for that one.
Can I ask a procedural question?
Yeah.
Are policy subcommittee meetings open to the public, or are they
They're
only?
always open, remember you
They're already
can-
open, okay. I just
Yeah,
wanted to clarify
They're
that.
posted, yep, they're always open to the public.
Excellent.
Yeah. Correspondence, we did receive a letter from a concerned parent about grading. I don't know if everybody got it. If you didn't, I can forward it on. She said there were grades appearing in advance.
Oh, yes.
In Schoology.
Right.
So Jay, I don't know if you want to address that, and I know you're kind of looking into it, but
Yep, we are.
I know
So
you
I don't
responded.
have-
I didn't respond directly, but I can, because I thought you responded, but.
Yeah, well, I can't remember
But
who
I-
received what, but, so we are looking into it. I don't have all the answers. The Schoology, outside of the high school, is largely new for us, so there could be a piece of user error. I'm not saying that's certainly possible. When I met with this individual parent, her belief was, I believe, and I'm paraphrasing, but the grades were being put in early to, like, falsely inflate a grade. That's 100% definitely not the case. When I looked into it, what I did find was, and it's a result of a good thing, and we'll figure out a way with Schoology to hopefully figure out a way to do this accurately, but it's only come up where I've seen grades put in what looks like ahead of time with allied arts or specials, so your art, computers, PE, that type of thing, and we've seen it was at the 6th grade level. When they set it up in Schoology, and I've never entered a single grade in Schoology, so I'm just going, that's about as much as I know. You have to set it up for that grading period, for an assessment. With your standard teacher, well, for the most part, the 6th grade teacher who sees groups of 25 through the day, they're gonna give that one assessment on that one Friday. So that's pretty straightforward. The high school, it might be over 2 days because the kids have to rotate through. It's with related arts or the specials, it's challenging in that they will see every 5th grader, for example, or every 6th grader, what have you, through the whole school. So that takes a whole week for all those kids to go through. So say the computer teacher's doing an assessment on programming. When they go into Schoology and set up for that assessment, say it's gonna run between March 7th and the 14th, I'm making those days up, but they're gonna have to set it up to end on the 14th. So any grade they put in for that assessment for her or his batch of students, which is 100+ students, shows up on the 14th. So the student who takes it on the 8th and gets an A, they want to put that in. That first, when they first started using it, the related arts teachers weren't putting it in. They were waiting until the 14th, till every kid had taken that assessment, and they were getting complaints. It's been a week, you know, my kid, how'd they do on whatever, the coding assessment? So to be proactive, and it's extra effort, they're on a daily basis entering the grades, which is great, but it shows up on the 14th. So when they look on Schoology, are you guys with me?
Yeah.
It shows up in the calendar on the 14th, and you're thinking, oh my gosh, it's only March 8th. Like, they're grading ahead of time. That's not actually what's happening, but that's what it looks like. So I've shared that information. I don't know if that explanation has sufficed. We are working with Schoology. We're trying to work with other districts that might be in the same boat. So far, we haven't found some great setting that we can just change it and it's just shows up on that perfectly on that day. So that's what we're struggling with. But I can promise, I'm 100% sure there's no ill intent. There's no attempt to inflate a grade in the related arts or any other subject area. But that's what we're working on now.
And it beats putting in a 0.
Oh, that's tough.
Or
Because
it's just
we have-
winging, like
yeah.
we've talked about it K through 12. We want to do an even better job providing timely grades. I want that done. That's a great thing. I think that basic explanation for 90+% of parents, that would suffice. But it doesn't suffice for everybody, and I understand that, but I haven't yet to find a workaround. And I've got a number of people who know a lot more about it working on it than just me.
Okay.
So
There you
it's
go.
acknowledged, I've met with the individual, but it's, until we figure out a better workaround or fix, it's gonna keep happening. And again, I've only had this one complaint. I hadn't heard about it, I don't know if you guys have before. I haven't heard
I had
one
seen it.
time.
I had seen it happening, but I didn't say anything because I guess I kind of figured that's what was going on. I have a 6th grader, so I see those grades go in ahead of time, and then sometimes they change and they go down.
And I think
you know.
you'll find, if you
Yeah.
haven't, if you look at the pattern there
Yeah.
for that type of class, it's not math
No.
as a grade 2 weeks ahead of time. If that did happen, that would most likely be user error. I'm not saying that could never happen, but I've yet to see an instance of that.
So do you think, I mean, I get the technical, do you think there's additional training that teachers might need for Schoology? I mean, I don't feel
Well,
like it's related, but
Right now, they either,
it's new, it's
go-
being
they-
piloted at
they
the
either
elementary
wait-
schools, right?
yeah,
Parents
right now,
don't have it, do they? Not at the elementary school.
I have no idea.
No, but it goes
how
through
to-
into Power School, which we do have.
Never looked
But they
at
don't go right away.
No, there's a delay, but there's not long
Yeah,
enough of a
yeah.
delay.
I think they've had a lot of training. It's for this one,
Okay,
again,
I mean,
the
I get
special
that
area
it
teacher.
sounds technical.
And they could just
yeah.
go back to doing it late, but that actually caused some
Right, we
concern.
had concerns about that, and I think.
So it's kind of two
Okay.
not so great options
Yeah.
right now, but we're
Sounds like
hoping to
maybe
find
it's
a.
something to work
No,
with
it was an explanation.
Schoology. Yeah, I appreciate the explanation. I'll respond. I apologize. I didn't because you responded and I
Yeah.
thought you trumped
I mean,
me,
I've
but
met with the
maybe.
parent,
Yeah.
I did follow up. I haven't in the last few days gone back to tech to see if a fix was found,
Yeah.
but I can keep updating you and,
Okay. I appreciate it. I want people to know that they're heard and that
yep,
we're
no,
trying to help
definitely.
them. I think that's the only correspondence I've officially received. But we do need to go into executive session. So can I have a motion to go into executive session, please?
I make a motion to to go into executive session to conduct strategy sessions in preparation for negotiations with union personnel, and to reconvene open sessions only for the purpose of adjournment.
Second.
Motion made seconded. I need a roll call vote. Melissa?
Melissa Maison, aye.
Heather Riley, yes.
Amy Marr, aye.
Jennifer Connelly, yes?
Laura Often, yes. As Jen said, we will reconvene in open session only to adjourn. So good night, everybody. Thank you for coming out.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.